On this video, I'm going to continue working through Job chapter 41. I'm working out of the Hebrew text, seeking to translate each verse and also looking at the grammar, pretty much phrase by phrase. This is, to me, very challenging. I find as I think about Job here, in my reading of Homer in Greek, for example, to me, this is every bit as challenging from a literary perspective. And I was always amazed at Homer's vocabulary. But here, it's the same thing in Hebrew. The vocabulary just goes on and on. And you would have to say this was the Homer of the Hebrew Bible, I think, as I'm looking at it. So I'm at verse 5 of 41, and I've been plodding through, trying to look at the grammar inductively and trying to understand the vocabulary. Let me begin, first of all, with vocab, the vocabulary, to lay the foundation for what we'll be doing. So as we pick up here, we pick up in verse 5, actually, and from verse 5 to verse 17, or through verse 16, we see that the poet is describing the crocodile, I believe, in great detail, describing we could say, the limbs of the crocodile. And so we pick it up in verse 5. But before I do, again, let me give the vocabulary of this section. We have kefel, which means double. Then there is resin, meaning jaw. Ema is terror or dread. Ga'ava would be majesty or pride. Afik would be channel. Magain is really from the word shield, so it would look at shield. Chotam means seal. Tsar means that which is narrow or tight. Farad means to divide or separate. Atisha means sneezing. And when you read the Hebrew, you're hearing almost someone sneezing in the way that the poet uses this word. Halal means to flash forth. Af means eyelid. Shechar means dawn. Lapid is torch. Kidur means spark. Nahir means nostril. Ashan, smoke. Dud, meaning pot or kettle. Nafach, to breathe or to blow out, to blow. Agmon, bulrush. Lahat, to set ablaze, and it's in the Piyam. We'll look at that here in a minute. Lahav means to flame. Savar means neck. Dutz means to dance. It only occurs once here in the book of Job, or really in the Hebrew Bible. De'ava means faintness. Mapal means hanging parts, or the bottom part, or the refuge. Namut means to shake, from mot, to shake, to be shaken. Pelach means millstone, and tachti means lower, or the lowest millstone. So what I'd like to do is get into the text. Let me just say, for vocabulary, I would recommend, and I use it a lot, is the Reader's Hebrew English Lexicon of the Old Testament, in 4 volumes in one, by Terry Armstrong, Douglas Busby, and Cyril Carr. And I appreciate very much their work. So let me pick up where I'm at, and that is in verse 5. So it reads, he's describing the crocodile. Who can confront him? Only God. And if God could create such a creature and all his power in doing it, then Job needs to recognize that, I think, is the point that the text is making. So we begin in verse 5. Mi gala pene levusho, behefel risno mi yavo. That is, who can uncover or unveil the face of his garment? Behefel risno, who can come within, or with, or by, I guess we could say within with the bait here, his double jaws is the way I would render it. Notice here we have the interrogative pronoun me. Then this is followed by gila, the verb gala, meaning to uncover. Pene levusho. Pene is from penayim, and here it's in construct, plural, masculine, in construct with levusho, which would be the garment of him, followed by the pronominal suffix in the o. And then vehefel, that is within his double jaws. Who will come is the way I'm going to render this in my understanding. Notice here, kefel means double, as we've seen, and resno comes from resen, meaning jaw. So with his double jaws, who will come? In other words, who's going to come into his mouth and try to open up his jaws? Yavo is from bo. It's a cow imperfect, a third masculine singular from bo. So what the text is saying here, as we're looking at it, is no one can penetrate through his tough outer skin, which is like his clothing, to expose the tender inner flesh. And who would try to come within his jaws? No one would stick his hand in a crocodile's mouth as though he were going to bridle him. I think that's the thought of the text here. And so then we go on in verse 6 as the poet continues. Dalte fanav mi piteach, sevivot shinav ema. That is, the doors of his face, who has opened? Round about his teeth is tear. So the doors from Delit, the doors of his face, notice Delatir is in the, now we have a masculine plural, delte. So the doors of his face, who has opened. Piteach is from the root patach, to open. It is a PL, perfect, third masculine singular from patach. Notice the hirik and the doubling of the middle radical, indicating a PL stem. So the doors of his face, who can open? Round about, sevivot, his teeth, shenav, from shenayim. Here now we have the vav here on a plural noun, or a dual noun, shenayim. That is the teeth. His teeth round about are ema, are tear. And that's certainly true. I think as we think about the crocodile and his teeth, makes you afraid even just to look at the crocodile. And he has a large proportion of teeth which fit together closely, allowing him then to grab onto anything which comes too near to him. His teeth then present a picture of terror. And that's true. I mean, as we honestly think about what the poet is saying, I'm amazed at the poet's observation of nature and of the crocodile. So then we go on in verse 7. Ga'ava afike maginim. Sagur chotam sar. That is, the way we would translate this, his scales are his pride. I would understand the channels of his shields, or the channels of shield, are his pride. Shut up as with a tight seal, chotam sar. Notice here the pride or the majesty in verse 7 of his afike. Afike in the plural here means channels. So the majesty of the channels of seals, maginim. Maginim is from the noun magan, meaning shield. And so we're looking at the crocodile and his, can I say, shields, as it were. And in this context, the crocodile's scales are like individual shields, sealed closely together. And that's what the poet is saying, I believe, as we go on. Sagur, it is closed. Notice sagur here is a cow passive participle from sagar, like to shut. So shut, as with a seal that is tight, as a closed or tight seal. And again, I believe we're looking at his teeth that are closed or sealed, as it were, tightly together. And so again, who's going to approach such a creature? They're sealed closely together, his scales, and they're like individual shields. When you look at it, you can understand, I believe, what the poet is saying. So then we move on to the next verse, verse 8. Notice we read Achad be'achad yagashu. The ruach lo yavo veinehim. That is, one with another is near. One is brought near to another. In other words, the shields are fitting right next to each other. Veruach lo yavo veinehim. And no air can come between them. It's interesting here. Again, we're looking at the crocodile and looking at his scales, and they are so tight together that even it's hard for air to come between them, is the poetic imagery here. And so they're like shields, and they're sealed very closely together, looking at the crocodile's scales at this point. Again, just a note here on Yagashu, one with another, and they are close. From Nagas, a cow imperfect, third masculine plural. And then no air can come, Yavo, a cow imperfect, third masculine singular, from bo. No one can come, veinehim, between them. So each, notice then the next verse, verse 9. Ish be'achihu yedubaku yit lakadu velo yit paradu. That is, each unto its neighbors, or to its, I guess we could say, to the one next to it. They are joined together, each to one another. And then yit lakadu lo yit paradu. They stick together and they cannot be separated or put asunder. Notice here, yedubaku is from dabak, to join. Here we have a puel, imperfect, third masculine plural, from dabak. So each unto the other, its other, is joined, and they stick together. Yit lakadu. Notice lakad means to hold fast. So they hold fast together. Here we have a hit payel, imperfect, a third masculine plural, from lakad. So they hold together and they cannot be separated. Looking at the scales again, below yit paradu, from parad, meaning to separate. So again, we're looking at more detail about the feature of the crocodile. And this is interesting, how this has, in such a beautiful way, the poet is describing this in intimate detail about the crocodile. So then we move on. While his scales are like individual shields, sealed closely together, we move on now to what appears to be his smoky breath. And so we move on to verse 10. Atishotav tehel or ve'enav ke'af ape shachar. His sneezings flash forth as light. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are as the eyelids of the dawn. Notice here, atishotav. Interesting use of the poet here of this word, anamata poiea. It's sort of like taking the sound of sneezing and using a word that describes that. Tish, and you hear someone sneezing. So his sneezings, tahel, flash forth. The root here is halal, and here we have a hifil, imperfect, third feminine singular. So it's taking the previous noun in a collective way. His sneezings flash forth light, and his eyes are as the afape shachar, as the eyelids of the dawn. It is interesting. We are told in Egyptian hieroglyphics, and I'm looking at the Sonsino commentary here, the eye of the crocodile represents the dawn. And it's sort of like its reddish eyes can be seen under the water, page 216 of the Sonsino commentary on Job. So this seems to be the thought here in verse 10, as we're looking at the crocodile when it expels or breathes. Their smoky breath is seen when the crocodile comes to the surface, and this misty breath sparkles like fire in the sunlight, we will see. And so we move on then to the next verse. And I thought about his eyes are like the eyelids of the dawn. It is interesting as I look at this, I'm reminded of Homer, who talks about the eyelids of the dawn. Interesting poetic thought here, along with that the noun that sounds a lot like sneezing, which is sort of an amazing poetic way in which the poet is describing it. So then we go on to verse 11. Mipav lapidim yechalochu ki dorei esh yet malatu. So from his mouth goes burning torches, lapidim, meaning torches, and sparks of fire, kidore esh yet malatu. Sparks of fire are leaping forth or escaping as we look at the crocodile. Notice from his mouth, lapidim would be torches. Yahalochu is from halak, to go, the cow imperfect, third masculine plural. And kidore is a plural noun in construct. It means the sparks of fire escape when he is like it were breathing. Yet malatu. What is this speaking about? It is poetic imagery describing the spray that comes from the crocodile's nostrils. And it seems that as we're looking at it, as it is reflected in the sun, that it somewhat looks like fire, as we're thinking about it, like sparks of fire leaping up. And so, again, what an imagination that the writer has here in writing this beautiful, beautiful uh, book, and how he's describing the spray that's expelled from the animal, from his nostrils as he is breathing. Um, just a note here, amphibious animals often expel their smoky breath violently than when they surface. This misty breath sparkles like fire in the sunlight. That to me sort of sets the background for where the poet is coming from. So then we move on to the next verse, which would be verse 12. And notice as we read on, from his nostrils, min nachirab yetze ashan, kadud nafuach ve'agmon. From his nostrils goes forth smoke as a pot that is seething, as a seething pot, and bulrushes. We would probably understand this to be burning bulrushes. Notice out of his mouth, nechirab, or from his nostrils. Nechirab would be his nostrils. Yetze goes forth smoke. From yatsa, meaning to go forth, a cow imperfect, third masculine singular, from the root yatsa. So from his nostrils goes forth smoke, and kadud, out of his, I should say, as a pot, nafuach, that is seething. Here we have a cow passive participle from nafach, to blow. So as a, can we say, a seething pot, and agmon means bulrush, and we could understand this as a singular, having like a plural thought, as bulrushes. So it's looking like his nostrils breathing out smoke is like a seething pot or burning bulrushes. Again, the imagery here is quite vivid. His breath appears as kindled coals or flame proceeding from his mouth, seems to be the thought of the poet here. So then we move on to the next verse, and nafsho gechalim telahate v'la'av mipiv yetze. His breath coals, kindles. His breath sets a flame or kindles coals, and a flame from his mouth goes forth. Notice nafsho here is from the Hebrew nephesh, meaning soul. I remember as we think about Genesis 1, God breathed into man the breath Nephesh Chaya, and man became a living soul, a Nephesh Chaya. So God breathed into man the breath, and he became a Nephesh Chaya. And here we have the word Nephesh, meaning breath. So his breath, interesting use here, calls, his breath calls le te la eight. Tela 8 means to kindle. So his breath kindles coals. Gechalim means coals. And notice Tela 8 is a PL imperfect, third feminine singular from la'at, to kindle. So his breath kindles coals, and lahav, a flame, from his mouth goes forth. You'd say from yatsa, to go forth. Historically, it was a vatsa, pe vav verb, where the vav elided, and now in this cow imperfect form, we have compensatory lengthening from what was historically a hirig to etc. here. So it's a cow imperfect third masculine singular. So a flame from his mouth goes forth. So his breath, as it were, is kindling like coals of fire. And the imagery here, again, is his breath is appearing like coals or flame proceeding out of his mouth. That's the imagery that the poet is describing. Then, as we come to the next verse, we're looking at his neck and the strength of his neck. Notice verse 14. Bitsavaro yalin oz, ulefanav taduts da'ava. That is, his neck dwells strength, or lodges strength, and or abides or has strength from the root lean, to dwell, or to abide. And notice before him, taduts da'ava, dismay dances. Now this is interesting here. Of course, yalin is the cow imperfect third masculine singular from the middle weak verb lean. And then we have before him taduts. Taduts only occurs once, and that's here from my study in the Hebrew Bible. It's from duts, and it probably means, most understand it, BDB understood it to be dance. So his neck abides with strength, looking at the strength of the neck of a crocodile, and before him dances dismay, or dismay dances. The thought here would be, it's looking at his mighty neck, and the thought, I think, is that even dismay, everything's afraid, everyone's afraid. The crocodile has a mighty neck of which everyone is afraid, is the way that the text is being described here. And then we move on to the next verse, and that is in verse 15. Mapele vesaro daveku yatsuk alav bal yamot. The flakes, we could translate this, of his flesh are joined together. They are, and the word here probably means they are firm upon him, they cannot be moved. Notice as we look at this, we have mapele vesaro. Mapele would be looking, no doubt, at the undercarriage of the crocodile. Mapele would be the hanging parts, the undercarriage, the refuse of the crocodile, of his flesh, daveku, are joined together. From davak, to join, and again, this is a cow perfect third common plural from davak. So they are joined together. Yatsuk, they are firm upon him. They cannot be moved. In other words, the undercarriage are firm upon him. Yatsuk is a cow passive participle from yatsak, and they cannot be removed from mot. And here we have a nifal, imperfect third masculine singular. Looking again at the firm undercarriage of the crocodile. I'm amazed all the way through here at the way he's describing this. The underneath parts of the animal are not soft, but are firm and hard. And then we go to the next verse, verse 16. Libo yatsu kamo oven. His heart is firm or strong as a stone. Looking at his undercarriage again. The yatsuk kefelah takti. That is, and indeed, it is firm as a millstone, as a nether millstone, as the lower millstone. And the lower millstone was always heavier than the upper one. And so again, we're looking at how firm this creature is in his undercarriage. And so he's describing his undercarriage as even as firm as the stone that would be the underneath stone of a millstone, is the thought here. And that is always heavier than the upper millstone. And it bears all the pressure of the upper upon it. So again, he's describing the strength of his undercarriage. So I'm going to stop here, working my way through. This text has been a challenge to me. It's one of the most difficult books in Hebrew, I think, the book of Job. Certainly much easier than Genesis, the Hebrew, at least to my mind. But I do believe that this is a classic. I'm going to stop here, and the next time I'll pick up looking at the strength of Leviathan, or the crocodile. And the whole point is to ask Job, can you understand all of this, Job? You wanted to contend with me. And I think it's a way of the poet showing again the sovereignty of God, and how before him Job will have to be silent. I would like to say, when I look at this as a Christian teacher, I'm amazed at God's diversity in creation. And in the New Testament, we're told that Christ created all things. In John, for example, all things were made by him. And so this just is an amazing thing to me. All the different ways that the poet Job is describing God's creative activity. You talk about natural revelation. I think we see it here in a very, very vivid way in these chapters of Job, beginning in 38 and following. So I'm going to stop there. It's amazing to me, one other thought, I can't imagine how all of this could just have happened by some great explosion or something. In other words, I have to see a divine creator pulling the whole show off, as you know, when you read a text like this, as C.S. Lewis said. So it's an amazing, amazing text, this whole section from 38 on. And it helps me to bow before a sovereign Lord and a sovereign Savior in Jesus Christ, who also created all of this, as we're told in New Testament revelation.